This presentation demonstrates the correct handling of the Straumann dental implant system within the context of the Straumann narrow neck CrossFit implant line. The Straumann dental implant system offers 5 implant lines with diverse body and neck designs, ranging from the tissue to the bone-level implant. All implants can be inserted with one surgical kit and require very similar surgical procedures. The Straumann narrow neck CrossFit implant, or NNC, is the implant of choice for narrow interdental spaces or narrow bone ridges. The NNC implant has a 3.5 mm width at the neck and a smooth neck section of 1.8 mm. Implant insertion is simplified by the snap-on transfer piece. The NNC implants are also available in lengths of 8, 10, 12, and 14 mm. Preparation includes 2 main steps. First is basic implant bed preparation. This step involves ridge preparation and twist drilling. The second step is fine implant bed preparation. This includes profile drilling and tapping. After opening the gingiva, the basic implant bed preparation begins by carefully reducing and smoothing a narrow tapering ridge with a large round burr at a maximum speed of 800 RPM. The goal is to provide a flat bone surface with a sufficiently wide area of bone. When choosing the implant length, the vertical dimension of the bone has to be considered. The implantation site, which was determined during pre-operative implant position planning, is then marked with the 1.4 mm round burr. The implant distance indicator can be used for this purpose. The position of the mark is widened and corrected using the 2.3 mm or the 3.1 mm round burr, if necessary at 800 RPM maximum. The implant axis is marked with the 2.2 mm pilot drill to a depth of about 6 mm. The short side of the 2.2, 2.8 mm depth gauge is inserted with the distance indicator to check for correct implant axis orientation. The implant bed is pre-drilled to the final preparation depth with the 2.2 mm pilot drill. Next, the 2.2 mm alignment pin is used to verify the implant axis and preparation depth. At this point, an X-ray should be taken, particularly with vertically reduced bone availability. The alignment pin is introduced into the drilled area, which allows the drill hole to be visualized in the context of the anatomical structures. If necessary, the implant position can be corrected with the 2.8 mm pilot drill. The 2.2, 2.8 mm depth gauge with the longer side should be used to measure the depth. This is where basic preparation ends for the implant with an industrial diameter of 3.3 mm. The profile drill is used to prepare the implant bed at cortical level, regardless of the bone class. The diameter indicated on the profile drill matches the diameter of the guide cylinder, and hence the diameter of the implant bed before profile drilling. The NNC profile drill is inserted at a maximum speed of 300 RPM up to the planned implant shoulder level. Tapping prepares the implant bed for a specific thread type. It's an optional step that provides flexibility to adjust the surgical protocol to the bone class. It is recommended in dense bone, thereby helping to achieve optimal primary stability. The tap used for the NNC implant is marked BLTE NNC. Tapping should be used in the coronal area only, or to the full depth of the implant bed, depending on implant diameter and bone class. To prepare the ratchet for tapping, a ratchet adapter has to be connected to the tap for adapter. The standard tap is inserted into the cavity, and the ratchet is placed on its coupling. The clockwise arrow on the knob indicates the direction of insertion. The thread is tapped with a slow, rotating movement. The direction of the ratchet is changed so that the arrow on the knob points counterclockwise. The holding key functions as a stabilizer to maintain the direction of tapping. For tapping with the handpiece, the tap for adapter is connected to the handpiece through the handpiece adapter. The entire length of the implant bed should be pre-tapped with the BLTE NNC tap at a maximum speed of 15 RPM and in accordance with the bone class and endosteal diameter. For a Straumann SL active implant, the blister is opened and the vial is removed. The blister ensures the sterility of the implant. It should not be opened until immediately before implant placement. The implant carrier is detached from the lid by pulling it off by hand. After removing the implant from the solution, the chemical activity of the SL active surface is ensured for 15 minutes. A Straumann implant can be placed either manually with the ratchet or with the aid of the handpiece. The implant carrier should be held at its closed end and the ratchet adapter pushed onto the transfer part until there's a click. The implant carrier is pulled slightly downward to remove the implant from the implant carrier. At the same time, the implant is lifted from the carrier with a slight twist. The implant is placed manually into the implant bed with the aid of the adapter. One option to place the implant is with the ratchet attached to the pivot of the stabilizing holding key. The clockwise arrow on the knob shows the direction of insertion. The implant is then brought into its final position by slowly manipulating the ratchet. The dots on the transfer part represent a distance of 1 millimeter each. They can serve as indicators for depth and help to position the implant coronoapically in the anterior area. While approaching the final implant position, one of the 4 dotted lines on the transfer part must be precisely oriented orofacially. Such accuracy aligns the 4 protrusions of the internal connection for ideal prosthetic orientation. A quarter turn to the next mark corresponds to a vertical displacement of 0.2 millimeter. When making vertical position corrections, counterclockwise rotation should be avoided. Going backward can cause the transfer part to loosen and may lead to reduced primary stability. First, the holding key is removed, then the ratchet, while the adapter is held at the bottom. The adapter is separated from the transfer part, and finally the transfer part is disconnected from the implant. Another option is to use the handpiece to insert the implant. The implant carrier should be held at its closed end, and the handpiece adapter pushed onto the implant until there's a click. Simultaneously, the implant carrier is pulled down and the implant is lifted out of the implant carrier. The implant is placed with the handpiece into the implant bed. Then the implant is moved to its final position by turning it clockwise at a maximum speed of 15 RPM. The adapter is separated from the transfer part, and finally the transfer part is disconnected from the implant. For submucosal healing, a closure screw or a short healing abutment is recommended. The internal configuration of the implant must be clean and bloodless for the closure screw to be mounted after the first surgery. The closure screw is picked up by the SCS screwdriver. The friction fit secures the closure screw to the instrument during insertion and allows safe handling. The screw is tightened by hand. The mucoperiosteal flaps must be adapted carefully and sutured together with interrupted sutures. The result should be a tight seal over the implant. Before mounting a healing abutment, the internal configuration of the implant must be clean and bloodless. The abutment is mounted using the SCS screwdriver. The friction fit secures the components to the screwdriver during insertion for safe handling. The healing abutment is tightened by hand. The soft tissue is adapted and resutured tightly around the abutment.